The twin-tail scorpion disappeared and left behind a dark purple life geno essence on the ground where it once lay. But beside it was something else, a ping-pong-sized purple egg. This perked him right up. Seeing the silver fox with its jaws open, preparing to chow down on the egg, Han-sen commanded the little angel to grab the greedy bastard. The silver fox whined at the little angel in obvious anger. It didn't attack her, though, for it knew how powerful she was. The little angel delivered the purple egg to Han-sen and then returned to the Sea of Soul. The silver fox brushed its head against Han-sen's leg and looked up at Han-sen adoringly, with its eyes wide open. It looked like it was begging. "Get out of here, you already ate that narcissus earlier. This is mine." There was no chance he would give the egg to the silver fox, so for now, he just pocketed it. Han-sen could see right through the silver fox. When they first met, the silver fox had acted all adorable and elegant. But over time, after Han-sen had accepted him as a pet, its mouth was revealed to be a cruel, vicious, slobbering munching machine. It'd eat whatever delight it could find without reprieve, and not leave a single morsel for its master. The only reason it was acting cute was because it wanted something, and this was one act Han-sen was not willing to fall for. Ju-Yume's heart appeared broken as she tended to Little Orange's wounds. Her pet had been stung by the tail twice, and the places it had been struck were starting to look purple. It seemed as if it had been poisoned. This made Ju-Yume look nervous, and tears started to well up in her eyes. There was a chance the poison had already reached Little Orange's organs. "I beg you, please go back to the Alliance. Return there and bring me back some antidotes. Do that and I will do anything." Ju-Yume pleaded loudly after running towards Han-sen. "Anything?" Han-sen gave Ju-Yume a strange smile as he asked for confirmation. Ju-Yume gritted her teeth and gave him the answer he desired. "Yes, anything." "Sure, just hang on a sec." Han-sen rummaged through his inventory for a pen and paper and then wrote up a contract. After he finished, he presented it to Ju-Yume and said, "If you do indeed mean anything, then sign along the dotted line." "Is this a human trafficking contract?" Ju-Yume asked as she scanned the details of the document. With wide eyes, she stared at Han-sen. If she signed it, she would become Han-sen's servant. And there was another condition listed on the paper as well. She would also have to train Little Orange to adhere to Han-sen's commands. It was practically a buy one get one free contract, in which he'd obtain 2 new servants. "It's entirely up to you whether or not you want to sign it. But that's the deal, the only deal," Han-sen casually told her. Little Orange really did look to be in a dire condition. But it was a second-generation super creature. Even if it didn't receive an antidote, it would eventually recover all by itself. Ju-Yume did not know this, however, as she had not learnt much about the nature of super creatures. Her concern for Little Orange also clouded her judgment by a great deal. She worried greatly as she observed her suffering pet. "Meow." Ju-Yume looked at Little Orange and saw how weak he was, meowing towards her, looking so pitiable. "I'll sign it." Ju-Yume ground her teeth, took the pen, and signed the contract. She didn't want Little Orange to suffer anymore after what it had done for her. If it wasn't for the pet's acceptance of her as its master, she wouldn't have been alive. Plus, Little Orange was only in this state because of its desire to protect her when it believed her to be in danger. Han-sen was very satisfied with this result in his new contract. Ju-Yume and Little Orange now belonged to him. When he returned to the Alliance, he could make Ju's family pay him a lot of money. Even though she was just the daughter of a councilman, the man would bend over backwards to get her back. Han-sen did not want to do anything bad to Ju-Yume. However, he was going to depart the area soon, and he planned to bring her with him. Han-sen made this contract to prevent any conflicts from arising out on the road. Every decision made would be his, and it'd prevent unnecessary arguments. If Ju-Yume behaved herself and did not cause any trouble, after leaving the desert, Han-sen would no longer keep her as a slave. And in the future, if he needed her help, he thought he might call upon her. The antidote worked, and after 2 days, the poison inside Little Orange had disappeared completely. Han-sen found himself a corner away from the rest and tried to cut the egg open. Super creature hunted, uncompleted build. The beast's soul has not been acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random numeric amount of super geno points, ranging from 0 to 5. Han-sen had never heard of only 5 super geno points being up for grabs, and the announcement didn't even speak the creature's name. The egg had to be little more than a fetus, and the creature inside had yet to formulate. But a single super geno point was better than none. Han-sen cooked it on an open fire and added a number of spices before eating it. The announcement sounded 4 times, bringing his number up by 4 to a total of 36. Until Little Orange was healed, Han-sen gathered resources for the road ahead of them. He was ready to exit the shelter and try to find a way out of the black desert. Over the past few days, he hadn't found hide nor hair of the fairy around the shelter, so he assumed it had returned underground. But a little while after they left the shelter, the fairy appeared out of nowhere. It flapped its wings to produce snow and madly came at Han Sen. Han Sen hadn't thought the fairy could hold such a grudge. He had only hit her once, and still, she desired payback. Without a choice in the matter, Han Sen quickly brought Zhu Yume back to the shelter. Although the little angel could distract the maniacal fairy, the creature would not allow them a single break or moment's rest if they attempted the trip while it was after them. And this was a trip that would require stops, so they couldn't continue with the fairy on their heels. There was nothing to do while staying in the shelter, however, so Han Sen returned to the Alliance and researched the sheet of leather and its scripture. He wanted to find whatever information he could on Blood Pulse in the army. Han Sen had seen the Blood Legion's Blood Pulse before, and it was little more than a religious doctrine that spoke of lore and mythology. He had never heard of them teaching skills before. The Blood Pulse he had in his possession now was completely different. What is all this about, huh? Han Sen mulled the questions he had for a while, but eventually decided to ask Qin Xuan. He wanted to ask whether or not there was a person called Qin Huasian in the 7th team of the Secret Service. Han Sen called her up, after some time of deliberation and hesitation. He said, "Team Qin, I remember you once told me you had an elder in the Secret Service." "Yes, what about it?" Qin Xuan looked a little confused when Han Sen asked her this. "I have recently heard of this man called Qin Huasian. Is that him?" Han Sen said. Qin Xuan nodded and said, "There was a person called Qin Huasian in our family, so who did you hear it from? And why would someone mention his name?" "I was on my way to the Blue Crystal Shelter when I happened to meet an old man on the road. He said he was a friend of Qin Huasian, one who used to travel around with him in the Second God's Sanctuary. He mentioned that his last contact with Qin Huasian was on a trip he took to the Black Desert. He never heard from him again, so it's possible that he died there. I just thought I should mention this to you, that's all," Han Sen said. Qin Xuan laughed in response, saying, "You must have been told a tall tale. There was an elder of ours called Qin Huasian, but he was a member of the Secret Service's 7th team. He must have been amongst the very first people to ever set foot in this world. He died shortly after returning. How could he have died in that world? And how could it have been the Second God's Sanctuary? Back then, they had only just discovered the existence of God's sanctuaries. When he was alive, they didn't even know about the difference in tiers between sanctuaries." Han Sen froze for a moment, having not thought of this issue before. When Han Jingjai first entered, it was shortly after the discovery of the sanctuaries. Even he would not have known about the tiers that separated them. Even if they did know, they couldn't have been there long, and they most certainly couldn't have been in the Second God's Sanctuary already. After returning from the sanctuaries, people died one by one. They didn't return to the sanctuaries, so there was no way they could die there, and they especially couldn't return to the Second God's Sanctuary. But this only added to Han Sen's confusion. If that person was not Qin Huasian, who was he? Why would he possess Qin Huasian's working license? I must have been fooled then. I apologize. Han Sen coughed afterwards. Where are you now, anyway? Qin Xuan smiled and did not press the issue further. I'm still in the Black Desert. Han Sen did not dare to say he found the body of that man. If it really wasn't Qin Huasian, telling her would only confuse her. Han Sen was researching the blood pulse to see if there was anything particularly special about it. But after his time reading, Han Sen began to pick up on the fact that blood pulse had a greater depth to it than Jadeskin. While Han Sen had only unlocked one, Jadeskin had 9 tiers he could unlock in total. His Dongshuan Sutra had 10 tiers. Blood Pulse also had 10 tiers of possible unlocks, which placed it on the same level as the Dongshuan Sutra. Practicing Blood Pulse could extend your powers with it. The powers you earn could also be genetic, and their traits and benefits could be passed down to your children when they were born. To put it more scientifically, after practicing Blood Pulse, it would be written down in your genetic code. The generation that followed the learner would be granted the powers when they were born. It was a scary thought. For those who inherited the skill, it would undoubtedly prove to be a big leg up right from the moment they were born. It was like being a few generations ahead of your peers. The leather text Han Sen was reading said that the initiation of Blood Pulse practice required a Blood Pulse relic. If you obtained one, only then could you truly begin to learn the skill. The only information that was available stated that the Blood Legion relics were gifts given to humans by blood gods. They were typically handed down through the generations by ardent family followers of the Blood Legion. Outsiders were never privy to them, and not even low-level members of the cult could see them. They were reserved for high-ranking members of the Blood Legion only. Although Han Sen would have loved to give his future child a leg up, he had no idea where he might find a relic of his own. and being entirely truthful with himself, he was unsure whether or not this requirement that was stated on the leather parchment was true. He didn't think it was very credible. After showering, Han Sen fancied having some food. Before departing, however, he heard a knock on his door. It was Jai Yanran. "My captain, how have you found the time to visit me in my little cottage?" Han Sen jested, smiling. Jai Yanran looked strange on this day, though, and it didn't seem as if she was in the mood to play along with Han Sen's jokes. She eyed him weirdly, and it was as if she wanted to tell him something, but for some reason, a phantom force held her tongue. "Yanran, what has happened?" Han Sen rarely saw Jai Yanran in such a condition, and this worried him. In response to Han Sen's pleading, she turned around and said with a voice as quiet and strained as a mosquito, "My grandfather wants to see you." It was as if her voice hit a mute button as her sentence trailed off. Her cheeks were red, as if they had been set ablaze. "Your grandfather, what does he want to see me for?" Han Sen was surprised. "Nothing, but if you don't want to go, that's fine. And if so, I will return." After Jai Yanran said that, she ran off in haste and did not look back. Han Sen watched her go in a daze, and he didn't even have the time to think about what just happened. "What is going on?" "Her grandpa wants to meet me." "Her grandpa is one of the few demigods. Why would he want to meet me?" "I feel so sorry for Jai Yanran, being with an asshole like you." Annie was standing outside a door, coldly looking at Han Sen as she spoke. "What does that mean?" Han Sen frowned and returned Annie's gaze. "What do you mean? What does that mean? You are a man. She is a good lady. She has been with you all this time and you have yet to propose. How is she supposed to explain this to her family?" Annie coldly explained. Han Sen's face turned red. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words departed his lips. "Or are you waiting for the lady to ask first?" Annie coldly said. "Her grandfather wants to talk with me about a proposal." Han Sen asked, shocked, as he had no experience in these sorts of things. "Discuss a proposal with him. He'll kill you." Annie looked at Han Sen as if she was observing an idiot. "Sister Annie, you know I have no experience with these matters. Why don't you offer me some guidance? If you do, I promise to repay your kindness. If you continue being with Jai Yanran like this, with no indication of proper commitment, it won't just be the traditional old men who can't bear you. I won't be able to stand you. If you really want to be with Yanran, at least get engaged. Then, that would be a sign for her family. Have you ever stopped for 1 minute to think about how much pressure she has been put under for being with you, especially a family like hers?" "This was my own fault." Han Sen blamed himself. He really did want to live and be with Jai Yanran. There were many pretty girls, but being with someone you could be yourself with and feel comfortable alongside, even if it was only a silence, that was free of awkwardness, few girls offered this type of companionship. Sometimes, all it would take was a look or a slight movement to know what each other wanted. Han Sen liked Jai Yanran a lot, and he knew she loved him in return. There was nothing bad in that. Han Sen was positive in his desire to marry her. Even if the Jai family did not approve, he'd still find a way to marry her. Such a good woman like that. I should put my label on her first and not allow her to be stolen. Han Sen touched his jaw and thought about the best way to propose. Han Sen's plan was simple. He was going to bake a few cakes and put the ring in one of them. When Jai Yanran found the ring in the cake, he could propose to her. It was a simple but charming method. He was still in the base, after all, and he didn't want to cause a big fuss or scene. He prepared the kitchen table in the evening, and just as he was putting in his final touches, she arrived. As usual, she waited on the couch until Han Sen finished making dinner. "I have baked a few cakes, you should try them." Han Sen brought forward a few cakes that had already been made. To enhance their appearance, Han Sen had shaped them with unique molds. The cakes were shapes like animals, flowers, and hearts. He brought the cakes in front of Jai Yanran, with the ring hidden in the heart one. On the tray he presented her, Han Sen had nudged the heart cake closest to her. He thought it would be easier for her to reach. "This is so cute. I never thought you could make something like this," Jai Yanran said to him with an upbeat tone, as she picked up the rabbit-shaped cake with a happy face. "There are many things I can do and make that you are not yet aware of. You will know of these in the future, I am sure." Han Sen didn't mind her incorrect choice. He knew she enjoyed her desserts, and because of their relatively small size, he knew Jai Yanran would end up eating a few more. "It's pretty good." Jai Yanran licked her fingers after eating the cake, showing that she really enjoyed it. Then, she reached her hand out and selected another cake. "This turtle looks so cute, as well." Jai Yanran picked her second cake, and it wasn't the heart again. "Yes, it is," Han Sen agreed, as the joy and anticipation in his heart fell back a notch. "What are you standing around watching me for? Shouldn't you be in the kitchen, finishing off dinner?" Jai Yanran gave Han Sen a strange look. I'm waiting for you to review each of my cakes. Han Sen softly smiled. They are sweet and soft. You should make a few more in the future, Jai Yanran said, after having a bite. And? Han Sen asked. That's it. Now go make dinner. Once we're done, I still need to go back to work, Jai Yanran said, with a tone that suggested a bit of hurry. Quietly, he returned to the kitchen with disappointment in his heart. To himself, he said, I really am inexperienced. Why would I create so many cakes for her? I should have only made 2. After eating the second cake, Jai Yanran reached for another one. As was stated previously, she really did love desserts, even if they didn't follow dinner. The cakes only took 2 bites to finish, too, and it was easy for people to eat a few at a time, especially her. But this time, Jai Yanran did not pick one of her own choice. She had started reading a book, and she let her hand reach out for one. Heart, 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 get the heart. No, Han Sen prayed harder than he ever had, as sweat dripped from his forehead in anticipation. He tried willing her to go for the heart, but she ended up selecting the flower. When Jai Yanran finished the cake, her hungry hands slithered around the tray for more. He clenched his fist, foregoing a desire to pray. This time, he wanted to truly bend the will of her mind to his own. But Jai Yanran did not choose the heart again. Pang! Han Sen punched the sink as his heart started to tear in two. What are you doing in there? Jai Yanran asked, after hearing a noise. Nothing. Continue to eat, my love. After covering his slip of the fist, he was doubtful that things were going to turn out the way he envisioned. There were 8 cakes in total, and if she didn't choose the right one soon, she'd be full before she could try them all. He quickly ran out and picked up the heart cake in front of her. Han Sen had no other choice. This was what he had to do. I can't. I'm so full. If I eat any more, I won't be able to fit in my dinner, Jai Yanran pleaded as she rubbed her tummy. Han Sen felt doomed hearing this. His entire body froze stiff in front of her. Please, eat another one. Han Sen brought the heart cake in front of her mouth and told her, with a pitiable look. She accepted the heart cake and had a tiny nibble. Eat it, eat it. Han Sen's heart was calling to the high heavens. He stared at her lips like he had a fever. Han Sen was growing impatient, and so he gulped his saliva. Jai Yanran noticed Han Sen's intense stare at her lips, and even the little swallows she made. Her face went red, thinking he was hungry himself. Not for food, but for sex. It had been a long time since they last did it, after all. She had been busily working in recent times, and not spent much time with Han Sen. Suddenly, Jai Yanran grabbed Han Sen by the neck and started kissing him. Han Sen was frozen, unsure what was going on. Seeing that the ring was close to being discovered, and having the situation suddenly turned to this was confusing. But Jai Yanran was on fire. Her hands wriggled their way into his pants and grabbed his Rex spike. It had been so long since Han Sen touched a woman. He wanted to push Jai Yanran away so she could finish the proposal, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Quickly, they both rolled onto the couch together. It was like a hurricane or a strong tide. When things calmed down, Han Sen was holding Jai Yanran's body as they lay together on the couch. Jai Yanran was lying down atop Han Sen's naked body, with sweat running down her body. She was like a lazy cat, not wanting to move. Han Sen's mind finally returned to the heart cake. He grabbed it and took the ring out of it. Jai Yanran saw Han Sen take the ring out of the cake and looked at him in disbelief, with wide open eyes. She wasn't sure what expression she was supposed to have, but all she could display was a mixture of overwhelming joy and utter speechless shock. His plan had been ruined, so Han Sen just took the ring and placed it on her finger. Loudly, he proclaimed, Jai Yanran, marry me. I want to have sex with you for the rest of my life. Pang! Ouch! Jai Yanran was so mad, she kicked Han Sen off the couch. The fall almost broke his buttocks. You go to hell. Han Sen thought his brain had fried, or that something must have possessed him to make him say what he had. He had prepared a very touching speech, but somehow, his head just said those words for no reason. I blame the beautiful night, Han Sen sighed. Jai Yanran was fuming mad, and she shouted at him with a blistering rage. Still, she was yet to give her answer. She had not said yes or no. Fortunately for him, when he saw her the next day, the ring was still on her finger. Jai Yanran brought Han Sen to the Jai family house. It was a planet full of azure seas and still lakes. Forestry was in abundance, and mountain ranges coursed the continents like white threads. The air was clean and the environment was unspoiled. It was more than suitable for humans to live in. On this planet, there existed only one building. However, this house was where her grandfather lived. It was like an entire, exclusive planet had been reserved for her grandfather. Without permission, even other members of the Jai family would not dare to visit. Han Sen knew how rich the Jai family was. Without the wealth they had, it would have been impossible for Jai Ryujin to become president. As he stood in the middle of a pavilion, he breathed in the raw, virgin air that passed through the pines up high and the grass down low. It was incredibly refreshing, and the nature-scented atmosphere could not compete with any man-made air. Miss Yanran, the master has requested that he meet with Han Sen alone. Outside the yard, Jai Yanran was stopped. Han Sen, you must be polite to grandfather, Jai Yanran nervously reminded Han Sen. Don't worry. Han Sen comforted Jai Yanran and followed the butler into the yard. Han Sen thought he'd see the house upon entering the yard, but instead he saw a lake. Its surface was like a mirror with a pavilion at its center. They looked like one. The only way to go to the pavilion was across a bridge, and as he trod across it, he felt as if he was walking into a sublime painting. It looks like this grandfather is an elegant man, quite unlike me, it would seem. Although he thought the place was beautiful, Han Sen would not desire to live there. Technology and metropolitan locales suited him far more. Sir, Mr. Han is here. The butler led Han Sen to the pavilion and politely spoke. Greetings, Grandpa. Han Sen walked up and bowed, speaking with a soft tone of politeness. As he did so, he checked out the demigod legend. Jai Yanwu was the center of the Jai family. He was a demigod elite and quite famous in the alliance. The Jai family's reputation in today's age was owed to this man. He was so well respected, even Jai Ryujin would not speak of him in vain. He was a remarkable and important figure in the Jai family. He did look different than what Han Sen had envisioned, however. He was a down-to-earth old man. His beard was white, but it was well kept and clearly groomed. He didn't use technology to dye his hair black, and you could even see the wrinkles on his skin. He looked very serious, though. His eyes stopped on Han Sen, but his emotions and thoughts were impossible to guess. That being said, there was nothing snobbish to feel when being in his presence. All that you felt while being in his presence was the need to revere him. You would feel compelled to listen to everything he said. Are you ready to marry Yanran? Han Sen had only just sat down, but such a question had already been asked. It came as quite the shock. Grandfather Jai looked at Han Sen, and his clear eyes looked as if they could read a person's mind. It made Han Sen feel as if he was naked in public, which made him a little nervous. Yes, Grandpa, I am going to marry her, and I have come here to request your permission to do so, Han Sen said, all without hesitation. Grandfather Jai looked at Han Sen, and then put away his scanner-like gaze. Then he said shortly, that is good. You are both still in service of the army. There is no rush to get married. Pick a date and bring your mother to Ryujin so you may discuss the event. Han Sen thought he'd have to say and do a lot more than that. But already, the talk had come to an end. He hardly spoke at all, and already, Grandfather Jai had bid that he return and make the appropriate preparations at once. He felt as if he had wasted his time earlier, thinking of all the ways he might approach and explain stuff to the man. After Han Sen was led out by the butler, a man and woman approached from behind. It was Jai Ryujin and his wife. Father, what do you think about this kid? Jai Ryujin asked. Although Jai Yanran was their daughter, they would still listen to the opinion of Grandfather Jai. He is powerful. He is composed. In time, he can indeed become something, Grandfather Jai said. Mrs. Jai sighed and said, it is a shame he does not hail from a bigger family. Although Han Sen could get everything he wanted in the second God's sanctuary amidst the rich families in the alliance, his influence was limited. He was just a young, smart guy, one without prior wealth. It is fine to be without a remarkable background. He will be given one. Following his joining of our family, Grandfather Jai said. As they discussed the details of the engagement, Luo Sulan seemed quite understanding and appeared very polite towards the Jai family. Her manners were excellent. Han Sen didn't think it was anything surprising. From what he could recall, Luo Sulan had always been an elegant woman. Things were going very well, and Luo Sulan did not ask for much of anything. The Jai family all agreed she was a nice person and believed her to be a well-educated housewife. Mrs. Han, after they both get married, I would like them both to become part of the Jai family. I believe it would be easier for us to take care of them, but I would like to hear your thoughts on the matter. Mrs. Jai posed the question. Han Sen did not have a notable background, but if Grandfather Jai thought he had a promising future, they thought it best nurtured within the Jai family. Through their influence, he could gain far more and his change of family name would reflect better on Yanran. Mrs. Jai also wanted to see her daughter whenever she could. Therefore, this matter was a serious issue of discussion for her. This was a desire of Grandfather Jai, too. The Jai family would allow the marriage, but only on the condition that Han Sen join their family. I am sorry, Mrs. Jai. I only have one son, and I was hoping he could be by my side when I grow old, Luo Sulin responded. Coldly, she continued to say, he is still a man of Han. A man should make his own family. Don't you agree? Mrs. Jai's face changed at those words. One of Jai Yanran's aunts chimed in to say, Mrs. Han, please reconsider your position on this. You are indeed correct in saying a man should create his own family. But one man's power is limited. If, in the future, he became Ruajan's son-in-law, that would make him the son-in-law of the president. If he did something inappropriate, it would shame our family. Yes, Mrs. Han. What year is this? Our Jai family is willing to help Han Sen. For with our power, he can become someone grand. He will make you prouder than you can imagine. Another middle-aged woman joined in to speak. I don't have many expectations. I only want him to be with me. Carrying on the Han family legacy is more than enough for me, Luo Sulin replied to the criticizers. Mrs. Han, this is not right. How can you not share concern for your son's future? Do you know what he will receive when he joins us? What he will achieve and where he will go? Aren't you selfish for not allowing him to join our family? Mrs. Jai's tone was infected with undertones of anger now. Han Sen could not hold his tongue any longer. He could take all the pressure if he was the one under the microscope, but he couldn't stand for his mother to be bullied anymore. Just as Han Sen was about to move, Luo Sulin's left hand stopped him. Although Luo Sulin did not turn to look, she held on to him really hard and prevented him from doing that which he wanted to. Jai Yanran quickly tugged at her mom's sleeves as well. A housewife's opinion is one that allows their man to do everything. You are destroying his future. The voice was calm, but it was one that was drenched in intimidation. After the man spoke, everyone on the Jai's side quieted down. What can the Jai family provide him? Luo Sulin, as composed as ever, looked to the screen and spoke. A reputation within the alliance, one that will earn him the world. These words were spoken by Grandfather Jai. They were commanding words, and they were spoken with power. If that is the future, then I'd rather he stayed at home raising babies, Luo Sulin coldly scoffed in rebuttal. She was not spooked by the man that was now addressing her. The Jai family's face looked strange, as what she said seemed so lame. You woman, you really don't know your place. I am being nice to your son, and you suggest he raise babies. What is it that you think men should do? Grandfather Jai was furious. He stepped beyond the screen to see the woman that defied him, wanting to destroy her son's future. As he talked, he walked in the direction of Luo Sulin. He took a look as he went, and his face entirely changed when he saw her. Lady Lan. You are Lady Lan. Do you not remember the Jai's third brother? Grandfather Jai's vocal cords were trembling. His knees went soft, and he knelt in front of her with tears rolling down his cheeks. Everyone was still. The entire living room was silent and dead. You could hear a pin drop. Who are you? Luo Sulin looked a little worried, with the man in front of her. She reached out her hand and tried to raise him up. Her lips lifted a little when she spoke, which indicated to Han Sen that she was lying. And she did in fact know who he was. Lady Lan, I am Jai Yanwu. I am the third brother. 34 years ago, I was fortunate to encounter you in the Sky Water Pavilion. You were only 11 years old, and you were beside Mr. Hating. If you weren't wearing the Saint Heart Hating brooch right now, I would have almost been disrespectful to you. Please forgive me. Grandfather Jai still would not stand up. Ah, it's third Uncle Jai. Get up. I can't accept such reverence towards me. I apologize for not recognizing you, for back then you were still a young man with black hair. I cannot believe, in the advent of all these years, I am now a middle-aged woman. Furthermore, time has robbed your hair of its color. Luo Sulin helped raise Grandfather Jai up. Grandfather Jai, back on his 2 feet, excitedly asked, Lady Lan, how is Mr. Hating doing? Grandpa's body is still healthy, but he is getting old and does not go out much. Luo Sulin smiled faintly as she spoke. Do I actually hail from a rich family? No way. If I was, why would I grow up in such poverty? Numerous times, we almost lost our home. Han Sen's heart was now brimming with countless questions. They all stared at Han Sen and his mother in perplexity, as what had just happened in the past few minutes was too difficult to believe. Now, they really wanted to know who Han Sen's mother was to make Grandfather Jai behave like that. Ruajan, we are to become a family with Lady Lan. You should all be nice to each other. Grandfather Jai looked utterly delighted, and he continued on by saying, we are so lucky. Father, who is Mr. Hating? Jai Ruajan knew his father well, and his behavior wouldn't be so ebullient if this was just anyone. Grandfather Jai's eyes seemed complicated now, as if they were peering off into his own distant past. It was like he was on a blissful reverie, taking a trip down the lane of his memories. His name may not be one to spark the imagination, but you know who he is. He has long protected this family. Solo, he reached the 4th shelter and even claimed a shelter for himself in a realm of demigods. Godslayer Luo. Jai Ruojan's face suddenly changed. Before he could say anything more, screams were already erupting from various corners of the Jai audience. Everyone looked at Han Sen and his mother with tremendous shock. The 4th shelter was not a place for ordinary humans. Demigod elites could only scratch an existence for themselves there. In the 4th shelter, throughout history, humans had only managed to claim 10 shelters for themselves. Demigod-class humans only used such places as safe houses so they could remain alive. 9 human demigod shelters were the fruits of a cooperative effort between many different factions of the Alliance. But one of these shelters was claimed solo by a human demigod. He fought for it for 4 days and 4 nights. This person was an enigma, and most people only knew his surname. He preferred to go solo, and he loved nothing more than slaying beings that were greater than him. Over time, this earned him the title Godslayer Luo. Although Godslayer Luo was a violent person with a strange personality, he was a protector, and those who swore their allegiance to him would receive his guardianship. Back in the day, we went out on a hunt. We went to take out a royal shelter in the 3rd God's sanctuary, me with a few uncles. We were victorious, but only for a brief while. Our claim was staked in that place for 10 days before the most wretched thing happened. A beast descended from the skies and laid waste to our new home. It overwhelmed the forces of our shelter, and so foul was this creature, it didn't seem likely our combined might could slay or even stay its attack. Me and 2,000 family members looked likely to be killed by that thing. But that was when Mr. Hayding appeared. He came alone, and with a single strike, he lopped the head of that monster clean off. The Jai family was saved. Without Mr. Hayding, there would be no Jai family. I wouldn't be alive right now if it wasn't for that man. Grandfather Jai looked upon the faces of his family and said, Mr. Hayding saved our family. If someone here does not treat Lady Lan with the respect she deserves, they will be subject to family discipline. Jai Ruojan and everyone else quickly agreed. But in their hearts, they thought, weren't you the one that came forward, seething with rage at first? Han Sen felt like he was dreaming. 10 minutes ago, the Jai family was bullying his mother. Now, they were all praising her. Seeing his mom suddenly surrounded by people who looked on her like a goddess, he didn't think what he was seeing was real. Is my mother really the child of Godslayer Luo? Han Sen's head was stuffed with questions. The discussions regarding the engagement resumed, and they seemed to go well. Grandfather Jai stood to the side, listening intently. In the end, Luo Sulan had the final say on everything. The Jai family didn't object to a single desire of hers. She was given an invitation to stay over by Grandfather Jai, but she turned the offer down. So, later, Han Sen and his mother left the Jai family household together. Grandfather Jai made sure all the family members bid them a fond farewell as they entered their ship. Mom, you have been hiding a lot from me. Now, when it was just the two of them, Han Sen started his interrogation. Luo Sulan simply smiled in response, saying, What did I hide from you? You never told me that my grandfather was Godslayer Luo. Han Sen was eager to know more. I didn't hide it, I guess I just never spoke about it. If you wanted to know, I would have told you. Luo Sulan blinked. Han Sen did not know what to say in response. After a few moments of silence, he had a question he wanted to ask. If your family is that powerful, how can we be bullied by our second uncles and aunts? Luo Sulan smiled and said, Technically, there are 2 problems. First, I was exiled from my family for running off to marry your father. As such, I can hardly be considered a part of the Luo family. Second, you're asking why we were bullied by our second uncles and aunties. That's a little harder to explain. We owe them, let's leave it at that. We owe them. What is that supposed to mean? Han Sen didn't expect that answer, and he ended up looking at Luo Sulan with surprise. I'm not sure, but that is what your father told me, actually. He never told me the details, however. Luo Sulan smiled as she spoke. My father, did he really die? Han Sen's heart always held on to the glimmer of hope his father might still be alive. Honestly, I don't know. I have spent many years investigating his death myself, but I have yet to unearth another truth. Still, I do believe your father is alive. Luo Sulan's eyes displayed certainty in this belief. Mom, your fighting skills must be powerful. They're okay. Your grandfather taught me fairly well. Luo Sulan smiled and said, Then why don't you teach me what grandfather taught you? Han Sen asked Luo Sulan with vibrant eyes that possessed a hint of disappointment. He hadn't been offered such teachings before. Luo Sulan smiled at Han Sen and suggestively asked, Are you sure I did not teach you? Of course. I think I would know if you had taught me something, Han Sen said. Luo Sulan reached out her hand to grab Han Sen by the ear and said, My stupid son, I cannot believe you have no clue about what I taught you. Do you think your decision-making abilities, fighting abilities, learning abilities, timing abilities, predictive abilities, thinking abilities, your worldview, your attitude to do things, the principles of being a human, and your reactive abilities were self-taught or natural attributes which you were born possessing? Han Sen was shocked, having always believed himself to be supremely talented through self-education. Now he understood that ever since he was small, the reason his mother left him to his own devices often was so he could become more independent. Even when it came to playing games, she had trained his abilities on the sly. Han Sen then remembered the game of Red Hands, which he frequently played with his mother. They played it more than anything together, and only now did he realize that this was what had enabled him to have such good timing and reactions, and also allowed him to read other people so well. But you never taught me the Luo family's hyper-geno art. Saying this, Han Sen sounded upset again. In this world, what makes you strong? If you are powerful enough, it does not matter which hyper-geno art you learn. If you are strong, you are strong. If I instead opted to teach you the most powerful Kaigong there is, it wouldn't have mattered. With low base traits, you'd be a noob no matter what. Who you are as a person is what defines your ultimate power, and you have done just fine without that hyper-geno art. I taught you the necessities for becoming a powerful figure in this crazy world, and from what I can tell, it paid off. She sighed, then continued to say, and I left the Luo family anyway. I have no association with them, if you disregard my name. The last thing I wanted was you getting involved with them, needlessly. Han Sen noticed Luo Sulan had no desire to talk about the Luo family she had left behind, so he didn't push the subject further. So, great-grandfather really is Instructor Han. I would like to know this, too. I thought your father was just an average, funny guy. He doesn't quite seem so average anymore, does he? His communicator rang. There was a message. The message came from a number that was unknown to him. Alongside the text there was a video, and it was showcasing a hyper-geno art. But this hyper-geno art did not have any instructions, and its ending was cut off. Wrong number, maybe. Han Sen took a peek and was quickly attracted by its contents. Giving it a proper read, he was shocked at what it contained. If this hyper-geno art was genuine, it supposed that you could unleash your elemental powers before achieving the rank of a celestial being. Such a power would unleash massive damage. A hyper-geno art of this magnitude was sent to the wrong number. That's a little hard to believe. There has to be more to this than meets the eye. Han Sen thought, so he decided to reply to the message. Hello, how are you? I think you sent this to the wrong person. If the person really did send it to an incorrect address, it would be easy for them to learn who the recipient was. It would be impossible for Han Sen to hide or deny the fact he had received the message, so there was no point in lying. No, I was correct, the person quickly replied. Han Sen was surprised. He frowned and sent another message. You know who I am. Han Sen. The person on the other end sent those two measly words. Who are you? Why are you providing me with this hyper-geno art? Han Sen was intrigued, and so he responded with haste. You deserve it. If there is anything you do not understand during its training, feel free to message me. It wasn't the answer Han Sen wanted, but at least the person on the other end was now typing complete, lengthy sentences. Han Sen sent another message, but he received no response. The hyper-geno art appeared strange, and it was delivered by a person who seemed quite fishy. Anyone would have exercised caution if they were in Han Sen's boots right then. Han Sen looked over the hyper-geno art quite a few times and came to understand that it was indeed quite a powerful skill. The details were very well explained, so it didn't seem possible for it to be a knockoff. Han Sen believed it to be the real deal. If he successfully learnt this hyper-geno art, it might be what was needed for the little angel to wipe out the little fairy. The only problem was the way in which it had been delivered. It came into his possession quite strangely, and Han Sen wasn't sure why anyone would be willing to send him such a special hyper-geno art willy-nilly. Han Sen wondered what the person sought to achieve by giving it to him. At this time, on another planet, a middle-aged man had a cruel expression on his face. He sat inside a pavilion, drinking tea. Do you think that guy will go ahead and learn it? He has to. The man did not move his head or avert his gaze from the fish. What if he doesn't? The beautiful woman asked, with some excitement over the entire affair. He will. He may not be Luo in name, but he still shares our blood. He is carrying our genes and so, he will learn it, the man explained, without lifting his head. His voice was calm and composed, and it oozed confidence. But his body's blood isn't solely from the Luo family. The beautiful woman squinted her eyes and continued by saying, Lady Lan has been gone for many years. She tried everything she could to get away from us. Why bother them now? This is the fate of the Luo family. It is not something we can escape. The man's eyes looked strange. If, I was just saying if, he did not learn it. The woman increased her tone of voice deliberately. The man now slowly turned around. He stared at the woman for a while and then said, he will learn it. No ifs, no buts. If he does not learn it, then that means he is not one of ours. The beautiful woman was silenced and she did not say anything else. She maintained the silence between them in the pavilion and simply listened to the gentle wind that caressed them both. The falsified Sky Sutra was not enough to draw Han Sen in yet, as Dongshuan Sutra was not inferior to it. The skill was presented to him out of nowhere, and he was still not sure who had given it to him and for what purpose. He wasn't quite willing to accept a skill he had no prior knowledge about, and he still had blood pulse to learn in the near future, too. That wasn't any worse than the falsified Sky Sutra, either. This was one aspect of his personality that Luo Sulan made sure to train into Han Sen as he grew up. Han Sen had spent half the day training, and his body was already beginning to hum with static. When he swung his fists, crackles and sparks of electricity popped and twitched, but the thunder power remained in his body. He couldn't fire it out like a projectile. Over the next 8 days, Han Sen madly practiced Sonic Thunder Punch in the Yellowstone City. Using the thunder element as a base, it only took 3 days for him to fully complete the skill's learning. But it would be pointless to use Sonic Thunder Punch as it was. Its raw power was similar to Elephant Disc Punch's power, and therefore would not be enough to damage the fairy. While Han Sen simulated his Sonic and Thunder power, however, a problem arose. When Han Sen cast both elements, he found it difficult to combine them into the Sonic Thunder Punch he was aiming for. Zhu Yume was bored as she sat on the bench in the plaza. Each and every day, all there was to entertain her eyes was Han Sen practicing and training his skills with the little angel. She did not understand why Han Sen still required so much practice, despite his already incredible strength. Suddenly, a large clap of thunder sounded. Han Sen's fist cast lightning like a silver sun. The wrecking fist was driven into a 1 meter wide and 1 meter thick pillar. It was annihilated. An aftershock followed the terrifying punch, which rattled Zhu Yume into dropping her snacks all over the floor. Her ears rang and her energy felt disturbed. She fell on the floor, spitting out blood. It took a while for her to stand back up, and she could only do so when her energy started returning to normal, and the sound had dissipated. She looked at Han Sen, who was staring at his own fist in surprise. Sonic Thunder Punch, eh? It looks like I've finally gotten the hang of it. The combination of Sonic and Thunder really is quite fierce. Increased damage aside, it seems I can even disturb the energy flow of my opponents. This punch is almost as powerful as Elephant Rex Strike. Han Sen was overjoyed. After his constant practice, he had finally completed his training of Sonic Thunder Punch. There was one negative, however: the punch drained all his power. It cost even more than Elephant Rex Strike. Despite his Jade Sun Force's constant replenishment of energy, he still had a shortage. But this did little to hamper his excitement. Zhu Yume sat atop a stone tower, watching Han Sen practice from a distance. After what happened last time, she didn't want to sit too close to where he was training. Although Han Sen did not talk to her much, and he wasn't nice whenever he did, she cherished the company she had. Recently, she had noticed that his ring finger was no longer naked. He had a ring on. Seeing this made her upset. Suddenly, another loud thunderbolt broke the skies. Even though she was sitting a good distance away, she still had to throw her hands over her ears as the energy inside her body succumbed to turmoil. After the loud noise, Zhu Yume immediately ran down to him. She knew every time Han Sen cast that punch, he'd be in need of a lengthy break. Hey, so, what sort of skill are you learning? It looks kinda lame, doesn't it? What does it do? Give people a jump scare. How about you let me teach you some real skills? Zhu Yume ran straight to Han Sen and spoke in a prideful tone. Han Sen smiled at her but did not say anything. The woman was already in her 20s, but her personality hadn't quite caught up yet. She was a bit childish, he thought. Seeing Zhu Yume like that, Han Sen had a flashback to his days as a child. He remembered when he once bullied a girl, all because he fancied her. I'm good, thank you. I'm afraid I don't have the time to practice your real skills, Han Sen coldly said. He could cast Sonic Thunder Punch perfectly by now, and once his energy had recovered this time, he would be off. He was going to attempt his next fight against the fairy. In the middle of the Black Desert, Han Sen and the little angel walked. They were a good distance away from the shelter, since Han Sen wanted to use a beast soul associated with coin. As such, he didn't want Zhu Yume to see. Han Sen ran across the desert sands, all the while observing the regions he paced through. The fairy popped out of the black sands, and with a maddened stare towards Han Sen, let out a fierce gust of icy air. Han Sen ignored her sudden appearance and continued his run. The little angel swiftly came to Han Sen's back and cut off the fairy's advance. The little angel garnered the fairy's attention well enough for it to go after her, and in this way, the fairy was led countless miles until the Yellowstone city was out of sight. Han Sen summoned all manner of beast souls and armored up in preparation for a fight against the fairy. Under the protection provided by the Ant King's armor and the Devil Unicorn's elemental shroud, at least Han Sen couldn't be one-shotted by his fluttering nemesis. He also had Jadeskin prepared, revved up and ready to withstand any ice powers that broke through his defenses. For the actual fight, however, Little Angel would be Han Sen's greatest weapon. Han Sen's combat contributions would be secondary, as his attacks did little to the fairy individually, but he at least hoped that together they would be greater than the sum of their parts. He didn't want to use the Sonic Thunder Punch yet, but he was able to incite the fairy's fury well enough without it for now. The fairy took advantage of her next opportunity to dodge the little angel's attack and buzzed right past her. Like a wild, icy shadow, she quickly gained on Han Sen. But this did not come as a surprise to him, rather, this pleased Han Sen. His eyes flashed as he cast his Dongshuan Sutra. Half of his body gleamed like silver lightning, while the other half chimed ominously like an ancient bell. The moment the fairy appeared in front of Han Sen, his fist blurred towards her. The silver lightning and the bell sounds came as one. His fist was like a silver sun, shooting towards the fairy. Dong! The fairy's face convulsed into an expression of hatred, and in response she threw her own fist to greet the incoming star. As they collided, streaks of silver lightning and cones of exhausted frosty air consumed the environment with the noise of a deafening explosion. The silver lightning could not hurt the fairy, but the bell's sound threw the fairy for a loop. She began twirling around at the mercy of a violent seizure, seemingly dazed out of her ordinary consciousness. The force that was birthed by the collision of fists sent Han Sen careening across the desert dunes, a 100-meter skid mark unfurling behind him. Blood flew out of his heaving mouth. The little angel dashed forward to slice the fairy while its energy was disturbed. Her hefty blow finally drew blood, forming a nasty gash. Pang! The fairy was launched into the black sand like a bullet, and it let out a screech of agony. Finish her, Han Sen commanded the little angel, as he quickly made his own exhausted retreat. After his strike, his body was weak. It would take him a long time to recover and become battle-ready again. If the little fairy found its wings and resumed its chase, he feared he'd be killed in no time at all. But there was no need for the verbal command, because the little angel was already raising her greatsword once more. She drove it down into the sandy cleft the fairy's body had created as it crashed. Like a geyser, ice burst forth from the sandy crevice. Inside the pit, the fairy was down on its knees. With excruciating effort, it lifted one hand to block the greatsword. The little angel's eyes flashed, and she brought the greatsword down once more. The fairy was drained of her prior power, and now the sword managed to pierce through her hand and draw blood. She let out another screech and, as if it instilled her with renewed vigor, amplified the power of her icy fortification. She stood up straight as a frightening, frosty air froze the greatsword that sought to end her. Within 2 seconds, the ice had consumed the entire blade. The little angel was afraid to get hurt, so she let go of the greatsword and took a step back. The fairy used this moment to escape her sandy coffin and raced towards Han Sen. Her frosty air swirled around her, and although she was heavily wounded, her demise did not matter if she could bring Han Sen down with her. Holy smokes, it was the little angel that injured you. What are you coming after me for? Han Sen's heart had been dropped into a vat of quicksand, recalling how he had actually only managed to hurt the fairy once. The fairy's final strike was stronger than anything that had come before. Knowing it would be impossible for him to attempt an evasion, Han Sen summoned his flaming Rex Spike and held it to his chest right as the fairy's fist was coming at him. Pang! An icy tornado was summoned, and it quickly smothered the flames of the Rex Spike. A brutal force was driven into his Rex Spike, which in turn got pushed into Han Sen's chest. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.